Now that we've confirmed that our query isn't generating any errors, we can go ahead with displaying the results of our query. So let's go down to the section where we want to display the results. There it is. And we need to put a loop. So we put one row of results each time that the loop runs. So the loop begins above the div for section. So PHP block there. And the type of loop that I'm going to use this time is called a while loop. And the condition that I'm going to have in the while loop will be getting one row of results at a time. And I'm going to store that in a variable called row and assign to that result, then the arrow operator, and it's fetch underscore ASSO. The problem with the mixed arrangements page in the Hansel and Petal site is that looping through the results of the database query has displayed each item in a separate div. We need to adapt the loop so that 4 items appear in each div, so we'll have 4 items going across the page on each row. It doesn't involve a lot of code, but it does need a little explanation. So let's take a look at the existing code. Go to our code editor. And the loop begins on line 57 and it ends on line 67. Inside there we've got a div, an unordered list and one list item. We need some way of adding 4 items to that unordered list as we had in the original HTML. So let's analyze what needs to be done. This is the basic structure. Each time the loop runs you get a div and an unordered list with a single item in it. We need the loop to control the opening and closing tags of the div and unordered list so that 4 list items are sandwiched between them. So the first time that the loop runs, the opening tags for the div and unordered list need to be inserted, but the closing tags need to be skipped. On the second run, both the opening and closing tags of the div and unordered list need to be skipped. The same needs to happen on the third run. And then on the fourth run through the loop, the opening tags should still be skipped, but the closing tags need to be inserted. And the output will give us 4 list items inside our unordered list. And to achieve this, we need to use some simple arithmetic to control the conditional statements around both blocks of code. The technique that we need to use relies on modulo division, which finds the remainder of a division of one number by another. Let's see how modulo division works in PHP. In PHP, the percentage sign is used as the modulo operator. The value on the left is divided by the value on the right, and the result is the remainder. So when 4 is divided by 4, the remainder is 0. When 5 is divided by 4, the remainder is 1. Let's look at that in the browser because we're using Echo to display the results of each calculation. So in the browser, we need to go to localhost/exercises/06_05 and the name of the file is modulo_01.php. And let's just zoom in on that so we can see those results more clearly. So when 0 is divided by 4, the remainder is 0. When 1 is divided by 4 using modulo division, the remainder is 1. And so when we get back down to 4 divided by 4, we're back at 0. 5 divided by 4, we're there at 1 again. So how can we use this to identify every 4th item in a series. Well, let's take a look at modulo 02 PHP, and it tells us that 5 is not equally divisible by 4. If we go back to our editing program, here is modulo _ 02 PHP. Number is set at 5, and we've got it here on line 14 an if condition, and we're using modulo division to divide number by 4 and testing whether it is equal to 0 using 3 equal signs. If I change this, say, to 8, save the page and reload, and it tells me that 8 is either 0 or it's equally divisible by 4. So that is the technique that we'll be able to use to control the loop, and that's our next task in displaying the results in mixed.php. So now we know how modulo division can be used to identify every fourth item in a series, we can fix the loop in mixed.php. To keep track of the number of times the loop has run, we need to initialize a counter variable outside the loop and set its value to 0. So the loop begins on line 57. We need to add our counter variable before that loop. So let's just add in a few lines. And counter variables in PHP by tradition are usually $i. So we'll set that to 0. And then when the loop begins, we need to have an if decision-making block. So if, and then the condition will be whether I is equally divisible by 4. So using modulo division. And to make sure that it is actually 0 and not a false result, we need 3 equal signs followed by 0. And then we need an opening curly brace for our block. Then these 2 tags will be displayed, and we need the closing curly brace for that conditional block. That goes there. So the first time that the loop runs, I will be 0. Using modulo division, the remainder will be 0, so this will be true, and these 2 tags will be displayed. They'll be inserted. So we need to go down to the bottom, and it's these 2 closing tags that we need to deal with next. So down at the bottom, a very similar structure, PHP block, if I modulo division 4 is 0, then we want to display these 2. And we need to have an extra closing curly brace there, so we will have a closing curly brace in that same PHP block. Put it on a different line so it makes it clear what we're doing with, and we'll have a end if there, to a little comment to tell us exactly what it's for. Now, as I said before, when the loop runs the first time, I will be 0. So at the end of the first iteration of the loop, I is still going to be 0, so we would get these. But you need to increase the counter variable sometime during the loop. So if we increase that before we come to this second condition here, and the way that you increase by 1 is adding 2 plus signs immediately after it. So what will happen is on the first iteration of the loop, at the beginning of the loop, I will be 0. When it gets after the first list item, I will increase to 1. So this second condition, I being 1, modulo division by 4, the remainder will be 1. So this will not be true. So these 2 closing tags will be omitted. And that will continue until the loop runs for the 4th time. At the beginning of the 4th time, I will be 3. And it won't get to 4 until it gets into the middle of the loop. And that's the way in which it will continue. The logic of this is a little bit difficult to understand. But as they say, seeing is believing. So let's save that. Go to our browser. Let's refresh the page. Wonderful. Success. We've now got 4 per line. It's working exactly the way that we wanted to. And let's just right click and view page source. And if I can scroll down and find one of the sections, there we go, class page open, class section. There we've got the unordered list, the list item 2, list item 3, list item 4. And then at the bottom here, we've got the closing unordered list, closing div tag, the new div tag, the new unordered list. So it's working exactly the way that we wanted to. If you found this difficult to follow the first time round, I do recommend that you take some time to review this video. Using a counter variable and modulo division to control what happens inside a loop is a simple yet very powerful technique. Modulo division allows you to test whether the counter is exactly divisible by a specific number. Updating the counter variable in the middle of the loop makes it possible to perform one operation at the beginning of the sequence and a different one at the end.